Christopher Nolan's epic The Odyssey was already getting hit online. The dislikes on the trailer, the latest trailer that was dropped a few days ago, the casting arguments, the why does ancient Greece sound like a CW drama filmed behind a cheesecake factory complaints, the dad and daddy dialogue that made half the internet suddenly become classical language scholars with YouTube extensions installed. All of that was already happening. Then the official Odyssey movie account over on X appeared to limit replies on not one, not two, but multiple promotional posts. Then Fox News picked up the press junket clip where Lupita Nyong'o says she would basically ask Homer why he spends so little time with the women in his epics. Then Elliot Page was reportedly revealed to be playing Sinon, whatever, which is interesting because Sinon is not actually part of Homer's Odyssey. And now, just to make the whole thing even funnier, the official Odyssey account is promoting a global tour. And unless I'm missing something on that map, they're not going to Greece. So now the movie called The Odyssey is dealing with backlash over modern dialogue, casting choices, press tour comments about correcting Homer, a reported character pulled from outside the Odyssey, and official X posts or posts that appears to have replies limited, and a global promotional tour for a Greek epic that appears to be skipping Greece. Other than that, everything's completely fine. Nothing to see here. Please ignore the smoke. The smoke is probably toxic. And somehow, this is for a Christopher Nolan movie. Not Disney, not Marvel, not Star Wars, Christopher Nolan. The guy who made people pay IMAX prices to watch physicists argue in rooms. And even if Nolan now needs comment section body armor 2 weeks before release, Hollywood's got a much bigger problem. What's going on, everyone? Chris here, the Critical Nerd, and thank you for coming back to the channel. Those of you that have subscribed, and if you're new here, welcome. Stick around. You might like what I have to say, or you might not. This is where we keep expectations low, receipts high, and watch Hollywood discover once again that turning off the audience is not the same thing as winning an argument. Today, we're talking about Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. And no, this is not going to be a 20 minutes of Nolan is finished. In my view, that would be stupid. Christopher Nolan is still one of the only directors left who can sell a movie on his name alone. I mean, the man made Oppenheimer into a global box office event, a 3-hour movie about nuclear physics, security hearings, moral dread, and Cillian Murphy looking like he hasn't slept since 1943. And audiences still showed up. So no, I'm not going to sit here saying The Odyssey is doomed because the trailer got ratioed, or because people are mad online, or because someone said daddy in an ancient Greek epic and accidentally turned Homer into Riverdale with boats. The movies could still be huge. In fact, I think it's still going to be huge. It's Christopher Nolan. It could still open big. It could still be good. And based on the first reactions coming out of early screenings, it may actually be very good. And that's important. Because the point of this video is not the movie's dead. The point is the marketing around this movie has now exposed something much bigger. The trailer created backlash. The press junket gave the backlash a mainstream receipt. The reported Sinon role, or Sinon, however you want to pronounce it, gave the backlash an adaptation scope receipt. The global tour map gave the backlash an optics receipt. The official X account, appearing to limit replies, gave the backlash a studio response receipt. And the early reactions, being positive, do not erase that. They make the whole thing more interesting, because if the movie's great, then Universal may have made its own marketing problem worse for no reason. And if the movie's not as great as the first reactions suggest, then this backlash was not noise. It was an early warning. Either way, Universal blinked. And around here, we do love receipts. So I'm going to start with the basics. Christopher Nolan's epic, The Odyssey, is scheduled to hit theaters on July 17, 2026. So just under 10 days from today, as I'm recording this video. It's being released by Universal Pictures. It stars Matt Damon as Odysseus, Tom Holland as Telemachus, Anne Hathaway as Penelope, Robert Pattinson, Zendaya, Lupita Nyong'o, Charlize Theron, John Bernthal, Elliot Page, and basically enough famous people to make the Oscars red carpet look underfunded. The reported budget is around $250 million, which would make it the most expensive movie of Nolan's career. That is not, let's take a modest swing on Greek mythology money. That is, please save the summer box office, Christopher. The superheroes are tired, and Disney is currently rebooting the same cartoon for the third time money. In opening weekend expectations in North America have discussed in the, we'll say, $80 to $100 million range. So Universal's not treating this like a small prestige picture. They're treating it like an event, and honestly, they should. I mean, it's Homer, it's Nolan, it's IMAX. It's gods, monsters, war, betrayal, homecoming, family, temptation, trauma, revenge, ships, storms, and one man trying to get home after 10 years, which in 2026 is basically just what happens when you fly Spirit through Atlanta. This should be the kind of movie everyone says they want Hollywood to make. A big, ambitious theatrical epic. Not a remake. Not a superhero sequel. Not a multiverse tax audit. Not another streaming spinoff wearing a theatrical release like a fake mustache. This should be the easy win. And yet the trailer dropped. I should say the final trailer dropped. And the conversation almost immediately became, what's going on here? And this is where a lot of people are going to oversimplify the backlash. They're going to say, it's only about the casting, or it's only racist fans, or it's only culture war YouTube, or it's only people who hate modern movies. That's too easy. Because when you actually look at the reaction, the complaints are coming from several different directions. Some people think the trailer looks too muted. Some people think the dialogue sounds way too modern. Some people think the costumes and ships do not feel authentic. Some people are questioning the casting. Some people are complaining about the accents. And some people heard, "My dad is coming home," and "pining for daddy" in an Odyssey trailer immediately aged into a retired Latin teacher with a migraine. And I get it. Yes, obviously, ancient Greeks had informal ways of referring to fathers. We all understand that language changes. No one expected Tom Holland to stare into the camera and deliver the entire movie in reconstructed Homeric Greek while Universal passes out subtitles and emotional support owls. But the issue is not literal translation. The issue is vibe. When you're selling the audience an ancient mythological epic and the dialogue sounds like someone wandered out of a Netflix teen drama with a sword, it breaks the spell. And that's the problem. And this is where the Odyssey becomes a perfect case study for Hollywood's trust problem, because audiences are not approaching this trailer with clean expectations. They're bringing baggage. Years of baggage. Years of adaptations where Hollywood took beloved stories, changed the priorities, lectured the audience, blamed the fans, and then acted shocked when people decided to stay home and watch a guy on YouTube explain the lore better for free. That is the environment the Odyssey is landing in. And that is why the backlash is bigger than one line, one shot, or one casting choice. One of the better ways to understand this is that the Odyssey may be walking into its own fatigue stack. Supergirl had one. Supergirl did not just have to overcome one problem. It had to overcome superhero fatigue, girl boss fatigue, James Gunn fatigue, all at the same time. That does not mean every criticism was fair. It means the audience recognized patterns, because audiences are very good at pattern recognition. If you keep serving the same meal and people keep getting food poisoning, eventually they stop asking whether the next plate has a better garnish. They just stop eating at the restaurant. The Odyssey may have its own version of that. Not superhero fatigue, but source material fatigue, race swap fatigue, modern dialogue fatigue. Why is Hollywood always updating the old story before proving it understands the old story fatigue? And yes, Zendaya fatigue. Now, before anyone starts hyperventilating, this is not about hating Zendaya personally. Zendaya seems perfectly pleasant. She's talented, she's famous, she has a massive fan base, but she's also everywhere. There's a point where an actor stops feeling like an organic casting choice and starts feeling like the default setting Hollywood selected because the algorithm told them Gen Z might clap. And if you're casting Athena, the goddess of wisdom, strategy, warfare, presence, command, the audience is going to ask whether that casting sells the idea on sight. I mean, maybe it does in the movie. Maybe Nolan pulls something great out of her. Maybe the trailer's not representative. But the point is, people are asking, and they're not asking in isolation. They're asking after years of high-profile casting choices where the marketing told them to stop noticing what they are noticing. That's fatigue. And fatigue is dangerous because fatigue does not need a perfect argument. Fatigue just needs recognition. The audiences see something familiar and says, oh, this again? Then there is the Lupita Nyong'o conversation. And let me say this clearly. Lupita Nyong'o is a very talented actress. This is not about whether she can act. This is about whether audiences buy the casting of Helen of Troy inside a Greek mythological epic, especially when the marketing is selling this as serious, grounded, prestige Nolan. Helen of Troy is not just another character. She's one of the most famous figures in all of Western literature. The face that launched 1,000 ships. That phrase is not exactly subtle. So when audiences finally see the trailer and the reaction is not mythic wonder, but wait, what? That's a problem. Again, the movie may justify it. Maybe the performance works. Maybe Nolan has a larger interpretation. Maybe the trailer is hiding context. But here's the bigger issue. Hollywood has burned through so much benefit of the doubt that audiences are no longer willing to wait patiently while the studio says, trust us, we have a plan. Because too many times, that plan was terrible. And when people objected, the answer was not, here is why this creative choice works. The answer was, you're bad for asking. That strategy has aged about as well as a Warner Brothers superhero roadmap. And now the story has another receipt because Fox News picked up the press-junket clip. And which means this is no longer just random YouTubers, X accounts, and comment section goblins arguing under a trailer. Now the press tour itself has become part of the story. Fox covered an interview where Lupita Nyong'o was asked what she would say to Homer if she watched this new version of the Odyssey sitting next to him. And I'm going to play you the answer.
I'd be like, so Homer, how do you feel about the screen time given to these women, considering how little you spend with them?
Oh.
Okay.
And then do you lean forward and look at him like that?
Yes, like, remember us?
Wait, what? Let me repeat that. How do you feel about the screen time given to these women, considering how little time you spent with them? And then came the remember us line. And that is the kind of quote that lands directly on top of the audience's existing suspicion. Because the trailer already had people asking, is this really the Odyssey? Does this feel like ancient Greece? Why does the dialogue sound so modern? Why does this feel less like Homer and more like a prestige studio note with boats? And then the press tour shows up and says, actually, we are also here to ask Homer, why did he not give the women more screen time? Now, to be fair, adaptations can shift perspective. That's allowed. There's nothing automatically wrong with taking an old story and looking at parts of it from a different angle. But this is the part Hollywood keeps pretending not to understand. There's a difference between adapting a classic and sounding like you showed up to correct it. Because once the marketing around the foundational story starts to sound like the movie exists to fix the author, the audience gets nervous. They've seen this episode before. They have seen studios take source material, modernize it, reframe it, lecture the audience, and then act confused when the audience says, wait, did you even like the thing you adapted? That is why the Fox News article matters. Not because Fox News decides whether the Odyssey is good, not because one interview quote proves the movie's bad, but because it gives the Backlash a clean, mainstream-friendly receipt. The issue is no longer just, some people online are mad about the casting. Now the issue is, the cast is doing press where the framing sounds like this movie is giving Homer a modern HR review. And I'm sorry, but that is a dangerous place to be 2 weeks before the release. especially when this is already a $250 million Christopher Nolan mythological epic with casting controversy, modern language or modern dialogue complaints, and an official X post where replies appear to be limited. At that point, you're not calming the backlash down. You're feeding it protein powder. And just when you thought this could not get more complicated, we now have the Elliot Page role report. According to Cosmic Book News, Page is reportedly playing Sinon or Sinon. Now, two important caveats here. First, Cosmic says this came from a leaked Hungarian voice cast list, not an official Universal announcement. Second, Universal, Nolan, and Page had not publicly confirmed the role at the time of that report, so treat it as a report, not a locked official studio receipt. But if the report is accurate, it adds another fascinating layer to this whole thing, because Sinon is not part of Homer's Odyssey. The Trojan horse is referenced in the Odyssey, yes, but Sinon, the Greek trickster who deceives the Trojans into bringing the horse inside the city, is most famously associated with Virgil's Aeneid. So if Elliot Page is playing Sinon, then Nolan is not just adapting the Odyssey, he's pulling from the broader Trojan War myth cycle. He is reaching outside Homer's Odyssey and bringing in material associated with the fall of Troy. Now, creatively, that could make sense. Sinon is connected to deception. The Trojan horse is connected to Odysseus. The fall of Troy is the event that sends Odysseus on the long road home. So there is a possible story reason to include him. That is not automatically some catastrophic creative sin, but from a marketing standpoint, this is gasoline, because the audience is already asking whether this movie feels like the Odyssey. Then they're already asking why Helen of Troy is being handled this way. They're already hearing press junket comments about asking Homer why he did not give the women more screen time. They're already hearing modern dialogue like Dad and Daddy, and now the report is, oh, by the way, Elliot Page may be playing a character who is not even in the Odyssey. Again, there may be a valid adaptation reason, but this is exactly how audience distrust builds. One odd choice is a choice. Two odd choices are a pattern. Three odd choices are a comment section. And four odd choices are Universal limiting replies on X while everyone asks why the movie called The Odyssey keeps sounding less and less like The Odyssey. That's the problem. Not that Nolan is forbidden from using broader mythology. Of course he can. But if you're going to market the movie as Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, and then every new receipt makes the audience say, wait, which epic are we adapting now? You're creating confusion right before release. And confusion is not confidence. Confusion is how a $250 million prestige epic turns into a 3-hour mythology group project where half the audience is Googling Sinon in the parking lot. And then, because apparently this marketing campaign is being run by the gods of irony, the official Odyssey account promoted its global tour. And unless I'm missing something on that official post, there's one location that appears to be absent. Greece. The movie's called The Odyssey, based on one of the foundational works of Greek literature, doing a global promotional tour. And Greece appears to be sitting there like, hello, Ithaca, Homer, anyone? Now let me be fair for exactly 7 seconds before the sarcasm comes back for lunch. Understand the business logic. Studios pick tour stops based on market size, press access, logistics, talent availability, premium format strategy, international box office priorities, and whatever spreadsheet ritual determines where Matt Damon has to smile at cameras for 12 hours. Mumbai, Paris, London, New York, those are major media markets. I get it. But spiritually, come on. You're promoting the Odyssey. You're already dealing with backlash over whether the movie feels Greek enough. You're already dealing with criticism that the cast does not exactly scream ancient Greek epic. You're already dealing with modern dialogue complaints. You're already dealing with a press junket quote where one of the stars says she would basically ask Homer why he didn't give the women more screen time. You're already dealing with a report that Elliot Page may be playing Sinon, a figure more associated with the broader Trojan War myth cycle than Homer's Odyssey itself. And then the global tour rolls out and Greece appears to be missing. That is not the end of the world, but it's another optics problem. And optics matter when your entire campaign is already fighting the perception that this movie is treating Greek source material like a decorative theme park instead of a cultural foundation. And again, I'm not saying every movie based on Greek mythology has to premiere in Greece. But if there was ever a movie where one stop in Greece would have made sense, even symbolically, it would probably be Christopher Nolan's $250 million adaptation of the Odyssey. I mean, just a thought, tiny little idea. Maybe stop by the country whose literature you are currently borrowing before asking everyone else to clap. And here's the part that makes it even stranger. This movie, reportedly shot in Greece, it used Greek locations, it leaned on Greek heritage. So if you're going to use Greece as part of the cinematic authenticity, maybe don't leave Greece off the victory lap. Because skipping Greece does not prove the movie's bad, but it does fit the pattern. And that is the problem. One weird choice is a choice. Two weird choices are a conversation. Three weird choices are a pattern. And now we have somewhere around choice number 7, and Universal still acting surprised that people keep noticing. Now, let's be honest about something here. A lot of the online commentary around this movie is rough. Some of it's fair criticism. Some of it's blunt. Some of it may be over the line. Some of it is the internet doing what the internet does best, turn every conversation into a burning dumpster where the nuance goes to die wearing a little helmet. But the studio does not get to ignore the entire conversation just because some people phrase things badly. That is the trick Hollywood always tries to pull. Find the worst comment, hold it up, pretend that is everyone, then dismiss the whole backlash, and then really that doesn't work anymore. Because there are real audience concerns here. There's a real question of authenticity. There's a real question of tone. There's a real question of whether a Greek epic should look and feel like a Greek epic. There's a real question of whether Nolan's grounded approach works for material that is inherently mythic. There's a real question of whether audiences still trust Hollywood to adapt foundational stories without turning them into a modern message delivery system. There's a real question of whether the movie is even limiting itself to the Odyssey, or whether the Odyssey is being used as a marketable label for a broader Trojan War epic. And now there's real question whether the marketing team understands how bad the optics are when a Greek epic seems to be touring everywhere except Greece. Those are legitimate questions. And Universal has to answer those questions by selling the movie, not by limiting the conversation. Which brings us back to X. Because again, the biggest new development here is not just people are mad at a trailer. That happens every week. I mean, the internet gets mad at trailers the way old men get mad at self-checkout machines. It's basically scheduled programming. And it's a terrible look. Because whether Universal intended it as moderation, brand safety, spam control, or just a social media manager having the worst Tuesday since the guy who booked Snow White press interviews, the optics are awful. The trailer backlash made people skeptical. Fox News article made people curious. The Sinon report made people more curious. The global tour skipping Greece made people laugh. The comment limitation made people suspicious. And suspicious is worse. Because now people are not just asking, why are people mad at the trailer? They're asking, why does Universal not want people talking under the trailer? That's how you turn backlash into a story. That's how you give the audience another receipt. And that is especially strange because the YouTube comment section has been open with people roasting the trailer nonstop. So if YouTube is open, but X posts appear limited, that creates an obvious question. Why there? Why that post? Why now? And maybe there is an innocent answer. But marketing is not just about what you meant, it's about what the audience sees. And what the audience sees is a studio trying to control the conversation 2 weeks before release. On a $250 million Christopher Nolan movie, that's not where you want to be. And this is the part studios never seem to learn. You cannot hide internet backlash by limiting comments. That does not bury the story. It gives the story a hat. Now people can point to it. Now creators can screenshot it. Now the headline is not just the Odyssey trailer gets backlash. The headline is Universal limits replies after the Odyssey backlash. Then Fox News picks up the Homer comments. Then Elliot Page reportedly playing a character who is not even from the Odyssey. Then the global tour for the Odyssey appears to skip Greece. Congratulations, Universal. You turned a comment section into a receipt binder. That is like trying to put out a fire by throwing a press release at it. It doesn't work. And it makes the whole campaign look fragile. If the trailer is strong, Let people argue. If the movie is strong, let the movie sell itself. If the backlash is just a loud minority, let them yell into the void. But limiting replies tells the audience that the studio thinks the conversation is dangerous enough to manage. That does not calm people down. That confirms their suspicion. And the suspicion is simple. Hollywood knows this thing has a problem. And now, here's the twist. The first reactions from the premiere and early screenings were strong. Very strong. The early press response is praising the scale, the performances, the IMAX presentation, the action, the emotion, and even some unexpected horror elements. So let's be fair, that matters. It would be dishonest to pretend this movie is walking into release with nothing but bad signs. It's not. The first reactions are a good sign for Nolan. They suggest the final movie may be much stronger than the trailer conversation. And if that's true, then great. I would love for the Odyssey to be great. I want big, ambitious, theatrical movies to work. I want studios to be rewarded for making something that is not just another franchise content cube extruded from the nostalgia machine. But the first reactions do not erase the marketing problem. They create two competing narratives. Narrative number one, Nolan may have made a massive old school theatrical epic that actually delivers. Narrative two, Universal still managed to turn the trailer rollout and social media response into a controversy machine. Both things can be true. A movie can be good and still have bad marketing. A movie can be artistically strong and still walk into release with audience skepticism. A movie can get glowing early reactions and still have to overcome the trust tax. And that's the point. The issue is not whether Nolan is talented. The issue is whether Hollywood has burned so much goodwill that even when a serious filmmaker makes a serious epic, audiences assume the studio's trying to sneak vegetables into the dessert. And that is why Nolan's name makes the story bigger. Because Nolan is supposed to be immune to all this. He's supposed to be the director who still gets the benefit of the doubt. He's not Disney. He's not Marvel. He's not Lucasfilm. He is not a streaming executive trying to convince you that a 6-episode homework assignment is actually a movie. He is Christopher Nolan. He makes serious movies for adults. He shoots on film. He loves IMAX. He has practical sets. He talks about cinema like a man who would personally fight your television if it had motion smoothing turned on. And yet, here we are. The Odyssey trailer drops, and suddenly the conversation is not just, wow, Nolan is bringing back the historical epic. Instead, it is, why does this feel off? Why does the dialogue sound modern? Why is the casting so strange? Why are replies limited? Why is the press tour talking about scolding Homer? Why is Sinon in a movie called The Odyssey? Why is the global tour skipping Greece? Is Universal panicking? There's the trust tax. And the trust tax does not care how prestigious you are. It does not care how many Oscars you have. It does not care how many cinephiles own 70mm ticket stubs laminated in their wallets. Hollywood has spent years draining audience goodwill. Now even the people who did not drain it have to pay the bill. Nolan may not have created the trust problem, but the Odyssey is walking into it. So let's talk about the box office real quick, because this is where it gets really interesting. The Odyssey is probably going to open well. I would be shocked if it completely face plants opening weekend. Christopher Nolan has a real audience. The cast is enormous. The IMAX demand is real. The curiosity factor is real. For a lot of people, this is still the big theatrical event of the summer. So the question is not just, does it open? The question is, does it hold? Does it have legs? Does word of mouth help it or hurt it? Does the backlash stay online, or does it shape the general audience conversation? Does premium format demand carry the first weekend and then fade? Because with the reported $250 million production budget, this movie cannot just open and vanish. It needs to perform. And if marketing is massive, which would not be shocking for a release of this size, then suddenly you're talking about a movie that needs a very large worldwide total to be considered a true win. Not technically profitable if you squint hard enough and count international vending machine revenue. A real win, a Nolan level win. And that is the risk. If the movie opens big and legs out, Universal wins. They can point to the backlash and say, internet noise. And to be fair, they will have earned that. But if this opens big and then drops hard, if audiences walk out saying the trailer problems were not just trailer problems, then this becomes a very different story. Because then the backlash was not noise, it was an early warning. Now, Premium formats, that's going to be the key here. That's what's really going to matter. IMAX can make the opening look very strong. Nolan fans will show up early. The hardcore audience will pay premium price. The film bros will arrive like pilgrims at a sacred temple holding their 70mm tickets and whispering, "No CGI," like it's a prayer. But what happens after that? That's the question. Because premium formats can front load a movie. They can make the first weekend look healthier than the broader demand really is. And if the Odyssey loses premium screens quickly, or if the casual audience does not show up after the Nolan faithful have already gone, then the second and third weekends become the real test. That is why the backlash matters. Not because YouTube dislikes directly equal box office, because they don't. If YouTube dislikes decided the box office, Hollywood would be bankrupt and every studio executive would be selling Funko Pops out of a storage unit. But online backlash can shape the narrative. And narrative can shape casual interest. And casual interest is what turns big opening into big runs. So I'm going to flip the script here. My opinion, this is the wrong take. The Odyssey is doomed because people are mad online. No, too simple. Here's also the wrong take. All criticism is racist, sexist, toxic, and therefore can be ignored. Also no. That is the exact arrogance that got Hollywood into this mess. The right take is this, in my opinion. The Odyssey may be a prestige blockbuster with real potential, and the first reactions may be strong, but the trailer revealed a trust problem. The press junket amplified the concern, Fox News made the Homer clip mainstream, and Sinon report raised adaptation scope questions, the global tour map created a hilarious optics problem, and Universal limiting replies made the backlash look important enough to manage. That's the story. Not Nolan failed, not the movie's dead, not everyone is bad. The story is Universal blinked. And once the studio blinks, people notice. The bigger issue here, in my opinion, is that Hollywood keeps treating the trust problems like marketing problems. They think if they control the messaging, they control the audience. Then they think if they limit the replies, they limit criticism. They think if they call every concern bad faith, the concerns disappear. But audiences have gotten, well, so let's just say audiences have gotten smarter, or maybe just more tired. At this point, people can smell the pattern. They see the beloved source. They see strange, creative choices. They see the press tours start talking about correcting perspectives. They see the movie possibly pulling from outside the advertised source text. They see the global tour apparently skip the country whose cultural legacy is being sold. Then they see the studio control the conversation. And they say, hey, I know that episode. That's not Nolan's fault entirely, but it is Nolan's burden now. Because the Odyssey is not arriving in 2006. It's arriving in 2026 after years of brand damage, adaptation fatigue, and audience distrust. And that means even the great director has to earn trust from scratch. That is brutal, but it's also reality. So where does that leave the Odyssey? Honestly, it's a fascinating position. It could still be great. It could still be huge. It could still be the kind of theatrical event that makes Hollywood briefly remember movies are supposed to be movies and not just content pellets fired into a subscription app. Christopher Nolan may absolutely pull this off. Based on the first reaction, maybe he already has. Maybe the trailer was misleading. Maybe the casting works in context. Maybe the dialogue plays better in the film. Maybe Sinon perfectly fits because Nolan is telling a broader Trojan War story around Odysseus. Maybe the global tour has a boring business explanation and Greece just did not make the logistical cut. Maybe the movie opens huge, holds well, and everyone on the internet has to pretend they never doubted it. That could happen. But right now, Universal still has a narrative problem. The trailer sparked backlash. The press junket gave critics another angle. Fox News made the Homer comments mainstream. The Sinon report gave the adaptation debate another receipt. The global tour map gave the optics debate another receipt. The comment reply limitation gave the backlash a studio response receipt. And the reported budget gives all of its stakes. That is why this all matters. Not because the internet is always right. The internet is very often wrong. This is the same place that turns every movie conversation into a hostage negotiation conducted entirely in GIFs. But the audience's distrust did not come from nowhere. Hollywood earned it. And now even Christopher Nolan is paying for it. The Odyssey may still sail into theaters and conquer the box office, but right now, Universal looks like it saw the storm coming and decided the best response was to turn off the comments. Great strategy. Very heroic. I'm sure Homer would be proud, or Virgil, or whoever we're adapting this week. Let me know what you think. Is the Odyssey Backlash overblown? Do the strong first reactions change your mind? Is the Sinon report a fair adaptation choice? Or another sign this movie may be drifting away from the source material? Does skipping Greece on the global tour matter? Or is that just business logistics? Is Universal just moderating messy X posts? Or is limiting replies 2 weeks before release the cleanest sign yet that the studio knows this conversation is getting away from them? Drop your thoughts below, assuming, unlike Universal, I leave the comments on. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell so YouTube may or may not notify you, depending on whether the algorithm is currently trapped between Celia, Kabiris, and Susan from accounting. And as always, keep your expectations low and your receipts high. I'm the Critical Nerd, and I am out.